Do you get longer battery life with the new iPhone 15 models, or is it really all the same compared to the previous iPhone 14 series? We have run a number of battery tests on all 4 different models, and we have the answers. And first, let's start by looking at the size of the batteries you get on each phone. For the vanilla models, the iPhone 15 has a 3349 mAh battery, which is a very slight 2% increase over the iPhone 14. For the Pro models, the iPhone 15 Pro features a 3274 mAh battery, which is again 2% bigger than the previous 14 Pro version, a very slight change. On the 15 Plus model, you get a 4383 mAh battery, which is just 1% larger than the 14 Plus. And finally, on the 15 Pro Max, you get a 4422 mAh battery, 2.6% bigger than on the previous version. As you can see, these are not big changes at all, and we still have the same proportions too, with the larger Plus and Pro Max model equipped with a roughly 30% bigger batteries than the smaller models. So all of this considered, let's go ahead and look at the battery test results. And on the table we can see all the iPhones now fully charged, and we kick off our first test, web browsing. We ensure all phones are set to an equal brightness level before the start of the test, and we run the same set of web pages over Wi-Fi connection with some scrolling to simulate real-world browsing. Now, we won't show you the actual test run here because it can take up to 20 hours on some phones, but instead you see a placeholder run. And with that in mind, we'll just zip forward until we see the first black screen, which indicates a phone is dead. And the first such phone is, well, it's the iPhone 15. Time on the clock is 13 hours and 25 minutes, which is an okay but not great result. And just as we speak, we see another phone also get the black screen. So we flip it around, and that is the iPhone 14 Pro, which scores just a minute longer at 13 hours and 26 minutes. These are very close scores, but let's keep on going to see how the rest of the iPhones will do. And we need to fast forward again, and the next phone to tap out is actually the iPhone 14 Plus. Now that was a surprise, and it finishes the test with a score of 14 hours and 51 minutes. That is much better than the previous two, but we honestly expected quite a bit more. And very shortly after it, we also see the black screen on the new iPhone 15 Pro, and it gets a score of 14 hours and 54 minutes. So that is interesting, but we have to keep moving on. And we do until we see the black screen, and now it's the iPhone 14. It finishes the test at 15 hours and 23 minutes, and it's the best showing out of all smaller sized iPhones. Really interesting. And now we're left with 3 of the bigger phones, so let's see how they do. They will last a while, so we will fast forward until this moment here when the black screen appears on the iPhone 15 Plus. Flip it around, it scores 16 hours and 21 minutes. It's better than its predecessor, but interestingly not as good as the Pro Max models. Those 2 phones really crushed the browsing test, and we have to wait for hours until finally the iPhone 14 Pro Max is the first one to die, and time on the clock is 19 hours and 5 minutes. Really impressive. But the winner is the new iPhone 15 Pro Max, which keeps on going for a while longer and finishes at exactly 19 hours and 20 minutes. Alright, time for a quick recap of all those scores, and you see some mixed results for the smaller iPhones and really solid scores for the bigger Pro Max models. This is interesting, but we're not ones who settle for just one test. So next up, here you have all the phones back on the table, fully charged up once again, ready for our second test. And this one plays back YouTube videos over a Wi-Fi connection. Easy and very relatable for so many people. As before, we show you a placeholder run rather than the full test, which takes hours. And to avoid boring you to death, let's fast forward until we see the first black screen. So flip that phone around and mark 6 hours and 54 minutes next to it, and it is the iPhone 15 Pro. All the other phones still have quite a bit of juice left, so let's go forward once again. Stop right here. The black screen shows on the vanilla iPhone 15 now at exactly 7 hours and 51 minutes. That is a full hour more than the Pro version, which is interesting to see. Maybe that more powerful A17 Pro chip uses more power, and that is what could explain that score. But let's keep on going. Fast forward once again. Next to give up is the iPhone 14 Pro with a score of 8 hours and 24 minutes. And not too long after, the regular iPhone 14 14 also dies and the time on the clock is 8 hours and 35 minutes. Those are all quite decent scores, especially for such smaller phones, so this is good to see. But now we're left with the 4 bigger phones, which again makes a lot of sense. And the first one of them to die is actually the iPhone 15 Pro Max with a time of 9 hours and 45 minutes. That is a good result, but look at the other 3 go. We have to wait for quite a while until finally we see the iPhone 14 Plus give up at 10 hours and 53 minutes. That is a great showing, and anything close to the 11-hour mark on this test is truly amazing. And just a few minutes after it, the iPhone 14 Pro Max also taps out at exactly 11 hours since the start. And this leaves the winner to be the iPhone 15 Plus, and it finally also finishes the test with a score of 11 hours and 14 minutes. Alright, all those numbers, your head might be spinning, so here's a quick recap. The bigger iPhones really win this one. But what does all of that really mean in the grand scheme of things? Well, here at PhoneArena we do a few new estimates based on our battery testing, and the first one is what we call days of use. Of course, these are averages, but we find them quite useful. So what are those numbers? At last place we have the iPhone 14 Pro, which combined gets an estimate of around 1.23 days of use. That's how long you can use it between charges. Next comes the iPhone 15, and it gets roughly 1.25 days of use in our estimate. Next we have the iPhone 15 Pro with 1.27 days of use. And these 3 phones are really close, and you probably will not notice much of a difference in their battery life, if at all, if you're comparing them. Interestingly, the older regular iPhone 14 with the more ancient A15 Bionic chip scores a bit longer than those other 3 at 1.35 days of use. And then of course come the big boys. The iPhone 14 Plus scores 1.52 days of use in our estimate, while the new iPhone 15 Pro Max has just a bit more at 1.65 days of use. Then comes the iPhone 15 Plus with an impressive 1.68 days of use, and our winner this time around is the good old iPhone 14 Pro Max, which has an estimated 1.7 days of use. At the end of the day, we have a confirmation. The bigger phones indeed last significantly more than the smaller versions, but within each model there are variations and slight differences that we were curious to see. In general, however, we cannot say that the new iPhone 15 models have much improved battery life. And the fact that the iPhone 14 Pro Max from last year actually still wins this test by a slight margin is a testament to Apple's older batteries alone. Next year, however, Apple is expected to bring larger iPhone 16 Pro models, which could have bigger batteries. They most likely will. So if you're waiting for an iPhone with a longer battery life, probably that's the one to wait for. In the meantime, which of these iPhones would you go for? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this, don't forget the usual subs, likes. My name is Vic. Thanks for watching. I'll see you around.